Welcome to Easy Email Marketing. I'm your host, Yael Keown, mum, FIFO wife, MBA, coffee lover, survivor superfan, and creator of the email experience. In Easy Email Marketing, you'll benefit from my nearly 20 years experience, where I'll be teaching you all the tips, tricks, and insider info on how to create feel-good, non-spammy experiences for your subscribers. Let's get stuck in. Welcome back to Easy Email Marketing. I'm your host, Yael Keown, and today's episode is focused on accessibility, and specifically the accessibility of your emails to the more than 1 billion people in the world who have disabilities and impairments. So this is in line with the Global Accessibility Awareness Day happening May 15th. And the purpose of this day is to get everyone talking, thinking, and learning about digital access and inclusion. I will make sure to link all the details about the Accessibility Awareness Day and all the resources that they have in the show notes, along with a bunch of other different things. In fact, I have created a landing page specifically on my website for this topic, which will include some written versions of what I'm going to share with you today. So if you want to check any of that stuff out, head on over to yaelkeown.com/access. But email accessibility isn't just about, trying to feel good about ensuring we are providing equal access to all. It's actually shown that 1 in 6 people have a disability, and 80% of those disabilities aren't even immediately visible. So what that means is you could be missing out on a huge chunk of your audience if you are not making your emails accessible. So 20%, that is quite a lot. So we want to make sure we are supporting everyone and, making sure they can access your emails. Unfortunately, most of us are not, myself included. The Email Marketing Consortium did an accessibility report in 2024 and the past couple of years, and they have found that 99% of emails contained critical or serious accessibility issues. Now, I think some of this probably comes down to the email software providers might need to step up with a couple of extra little things that they can do to improve. But obviously, there are little things that we can do when we are drafting our emails, when creating our emails, to make sure they are accessible. So in this episode, I am going to go into some of the things you want to consider, but definitely check out that landing page, yaelkeown.com/access, where I give a dot by dot point breakdown so you can just implement perhaps one thing at a time. But an important note before I get stuck in, and I want to be completely transparent here, I have been hesitant in sharing this content. I have talked about email accessibility in the past, and I have shared my story behind accessibility, but I still have that fear that I'll get it wrong, that I'll provide incomplete information, and there are just things I don't know. Like, it is a big world, and it does start to involve coding language, so I can see how it is completely overwhelming for just the everyday person. But then that's what I'm all about, right? So maybe I don't have the expert programming language that other people do, but I do have this capacity to try to really bring it to basics so that everyone can implement these things. But perhaps the bigger fear is that I do know that a lot of my content, both on my website and my emails, do not meet the recommendations I will give. Perhaps not even 80% of them. There are things that I need to improve on, and it is a challenge for me to find that extra time to just do those tweaks. And every time I research this topic, the more I realize I missed the mark. So it has delayed me from sharing it further, but that does not mean it's not important to share. So you know what, I'm doing it anyway, and I'm chipping away at improving my own accessibility standards, and hopefully things will continue to improve. And my big why behind this, and I have shared this before, but my son, who's now 8, about 4 years ago was diagnosed with a vision impairment. And I was terrified at the time. I was scared of all the things he would miss out on in this world, all the extra challenges he will face. But what I've learned over the last few years is that there's so many adaptations, there's so many things that we have on hand that can help. And thankfully, he is not at the extreme of having, being blind or anything like that. So it is just an impairment, and hopefully it stays that way. But it has been a big wake-up call. Also, as late diagnosed ADHD, I know firsthand what it's like to feel like you should be able to do something a certain way because that's how things are done, that you have to fit this certain mold in the world. But that's not the world we need to live in anymore. So I'm hoping these things that I'm going to share with you are just a few small actions that you can take today. So before I get stuck into the tips, I just want to share a couple of the common disabilities that we need to be thinking about. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but in broad terms, we have vision impairments and hearing impairments. So for vision impaired, they need high contrast, large fonts, and easy to read content. Blind users will need screen readers for content and use the keyboard to interact with your emails. So they can't be using a mouse. So these are the things that we don't think about. And while if you're struggling with hearing, they can read the text, but we still need to consider any content that we link to that include audio and make sure we've got those closed captions, we've got transcripts, all of those things going on. Then we have motor impairments. And we sometimes don't think about motor impairments when it comes to digital technologies because we think about it as, actively like someone in a wheelchair or something like that out and about. But this could just be for the basic additional need of having like larger buttons to press or bigger spacing between links. And it could extend to using those same screen readers, using alternative keyboards. I mean, there's eye control things, there's all sorts of adaptive software out there. Of course, it's tricky to appeal to cover every piece of software out there, but it is still something that we need to be aware of. And finally, there are the cognitive impairments. So we've got neurodivergence, so ADHD, autism, dyslexia is huge for the written word, dysgraphia, and there's all sorts of other learning challenges. And someone with ADHD like myself, and often with all these cognitive challenges, can benefit from clear content, precise instructions, great structure, and visual supports. So we're juggling also this competitive thing of we have needing visual aids to support the neurodiverse, but obviously we can't rely solely on visual because of the vision impaired. So you can see this balance that we're working with here. But beyond that, I just want to mention that accessible content is just great strategy anyway. So direct calls to action result in greater conversions. More and more users want to use text to voice anyway. So how many times do you start to see that more and more where things are just being read out? And AI tools are summarizing content. And so if we make it easier for computers and coding and everything to read content of our pages, of our emails, then it's going to be easier for AI tools to support as well. So yes, all of these things that I'm going to talk about can benefit everyone. Oh, that feels like a big introduction. So now with all that said, let's get into some of the things that you need to think about. And I've got 9 broad categories here. So I'm going to rapid fire through this. And if you want to check this out, as I mentioned, head on over to yaelkeown.com/access. So the first layer is on the layer of coding, which can be scary. But to make screen readers as effective as possible, we need a dir attribute for text direction, so it knows which way to read the text. We need a lang, L-A-N-G, attribute to detect language. If someone opens it as a web page, which some screen readers do, we might need to include a title element within the code. Now, all 3 of these things actually don't come standard. At least I tested with my active campaign. I exported the code and I put it into ChatGPT to see whether it had these elements, and it didn't. So already there's something there I can improve on. Also, you want to make sure you are using your header tags. So having at least one H1 tag, so users, especially screen readers, know the point of the email, and also using those header tags throughout H2, H3 to reflect the structure. So the order of priority of content within the email itself. Now, obviously, I think me and many people use the header tags to change the design of fonts and make them bigger and smaller. Yes, that is a great shortcut for those. But if you are just trying to add in some of these extra layers so that screen readers can read the content properly, you can just restyle it back to the paragraph text. And of course, we always need to have a plain text version of emails, but that is pretty stock standard as long as you click the box. The second layer is to do with design. So firstly, we always want to check our color contrast between our background and our text. So we really want to make sure that the text is easy to read. We want to make sure our designs are responsive. This should be stock standard. So not only to resize to mobile and tablets, but people, remember, might be zooming in a lot more. We also want to make sure we support dark mode. I love dark mode on my content, and it's really obvious those emails that don't do it. So to support this, we don't hard code background colors where possible. And when using PNG images, like for logos and stuff, use transparent ones. So it's got the transparent background. Also, please do use the dedicated content blocks from your builder, so all that function code is built in. So don't use an image to make a button, for example. And also just take into consideration like keyboard navigation, like people are clicking tab or the arrows to go across to the next thing. The next layer is then structure. So once again, lines up with the header 1 tags, etc. That is just having a clear hierarchy and it's all visually organized and looking good. A lot of the structure stuff more helps with the cognitive elements. And that is just keeping, your paragraphs short, 2 to 4 sentences max, keeping plenty of white space, using bullet points, using icons and symbols to help visualize content and help explain it better. And that's just great strategy. Like, it just makes it easier and clearer without people having to put in as much effort to read things. And please only use tables for data. If you need columns in your emails, please use the structure elements of your email designer. Okay. That's kind of the big picture. Now let's go into some specific elements. So next up we have our text. So we want to make sure your fonts are large enough. Sans serif fonts are preferred. So these are the ones without the little lines at the top and bottom because they are just easier to read. We want to avoid all caps. So this is something that I need to fix across my website because apparently some screen readers may even read them letter by letter because it's all caps. So it's all like shouty words. We want our text to be left aligned, not justified, because otherwise it gets spread out too much. And I suggest using a spacing of at least 1.5 times, just to make everything scannable and easier to read. For our calls to action, we need to ensure there is a visual contrast in the text colors between the standard text and the link text. And we want to make sure that they're underlined as well, because some people might not be able to distinguish the colors. We also want to use descriptive link text. So the screen readers will say, as soon as it sees it's a link, it will say the words click, and then it will read the words. And all of a sudden just saying click here for something, it doesn't have the context. So instead of just saying, of hyperlinking the here, hyperlink the full click here to book an appointment. And so it's all really in context. Ensure any of those links and buttons are big enough touch targets. So if you're using touch screens and people, who have motor control challenges might need to be, trying to get touch buttons, and there's nothing more annoying than trying to get something really, really small. And then just keeping plenty of spacing between the rows of links. Then we also want to think about our language that we're using. So avoiding confusing jargon. Again, keeping messaging concise and to the point. Not using filler words like just, actually, literally. So this is just great copywriting. But these are just things that we need to think about. And also use explicit language like Browse our latest collection instead of shop now. Again, it's a great strategy as well as accessibility. Now, your images. Firstly, and I still see this happening, never replace key email text with images. I know the temptation is there when you're in the email designer that you're struggling to make it look good. So you go to Canva and you create a whole image in Canva and just put it in the email. Firstly, that means that if someone has images turned off in their email inbox, they won't see any of your content. But secondly, screen readers, of course, can't read it. It's not, a great strategy to use. So never replace key email text with images. They should only be used to enhance messaging. And add your alt text. Now, obviously, if it's just like a simple icon, you can just say picture icon or like a speech bubble icon. But if it's, got some words on it and it's got some important information, please put your alt text in there. The next layer is your personalization and control. So this comes in to all of the segmenting and conditioning things that I talk about by showing people what's relevant to them. So adding conditional content blocks to only display relevant content and giving users the choice of what emails they receive and what not. Because some people don't want to be overwhelmed with specific emails and some people do not want to miss out on anything. So allowing them to choose their preferences. And then the final layer that I just want to briefly mention is also your sign-up forms. Again, something new I learned is that screen readers can't read placeholder text. So I'm not sure whether you've seen even probably the form on this very page that I will link to. They have inside the box, you might put in first name instead of having first name and then the field. But apparently screen readers can't read what is in that little box. So you do need to have a label. It could be hidden, but it does need to be there. Obviously, we need to make all input fields large enough for touch control and, again, using explicit language on all buttons. I know that's a big, long list of things to think about and implement. So we've talked about some code and design and structure. We've talked about specific text elements, calls to action and images. And we've also spoken about, the language that you use, etc. But many of these things we can fix really, really quickly by just going back to our master template and making those changes or making sure we have content blocks that suit all of those scenarios. So once you have a great template in place that has that extra code, that has the conditional content blocks, that has all the fonts in the correct sizes and the contrasts and everything else, it just comes down to when you're writing each individual email, just A, making sure you've got great copy, and B, adding a little bit of alt text and making sure you've got a header tag in there. It's not a huge deal once you've got those basics set up. So make sure you head on over to that link to go through the list. And even if you just make a couple of small changes, if you spend half an hour just working on your email template, you will be surprised at how much better and how much more accessible your emails will be. On that page, I also have a range of links of different resources, of compliance tips, because as I mentioned, I am not the expert. This isn't about trying to garner up more business or anything like that. This is just sharing my knowledge and trying to make it into an easy to learn way and being honest about where I'm at with mine and trying to just get better. Because as we say, as you know better, you do better. Okay, so I will leave you there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and hopefully you have learned some great tips. I would love to hear from you about what you've enjoyed from this episode or what you want to know more about. So please do let me know over on Instagram. I'm at Yale Keown and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Easy Email Marketing. It's an absolute honour that you chose to listen. If you love this episode, then it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review so that others can find this podcast and make their email marketing easy too. Finally, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. Until next time, have an awesome day and make sure to keep showing up and serving in those inboxes.